Alright, today I was going to show everybody some of the files I use and then the actual process I use to write some of the narrative and stuff. So first, this is the Saving Gabe plot summary and lore doc. This is the same thing I did when I wrote Waking Anton. Basically, I've got a plot summary and a lore doc. The lore is, well, this is sci-fi, so it takes place in the future a little bit, and the lore is kind of like the history of the world, and then of course the plot is what's actually happening in our story. And you can see here we've got some subplot stuff, and we've got book 2, we've got book 3, and then the lore stuff. It's not real big, but this was all built during a conversation I had with the ChatGPT app on my phone. So when we were talking, we got it to where I kind of liked it. I said, go ahead and save all of that to a text file. It did, and then I took that and dropped it in here. Now I did the same thing with our character sheet, and this character sheet is a little bit lighter than the one from Waking Anton, and the reason why is some of these characters cross over, so I'm able to use that character sheet as well to supplement this one, and this one's more of a highlight sheet. Then we've got the Saving Gabe Life Aboard the Tesla, World Building Foundations. Now see, this is all about different locations, and this story, the plot takes place on a spaceship. Okay, it's an interstellar ship, and this basically tells us all about it. It gives us the demographics information, population, the culture of society. So we kind of had a long conversation about all of that. And when we got things like the way I thought it should be, I asked again for it to create a file that I could download. When it did, I got back to my computer, I just saved it to a Google Doc. Okay, and then we've got our extended chapter outline. So the next thing we worked on was creating this outline right here, and this is for book 1. This is just an outline of the chapters based on the plot summary stuff and everything else we've talked about. So then we took this, I fed it back into it, and we started to break it down into a scene list. And I've kind of marked off the ones that I've worked on here. I don't normally do that, but I just did that for reference so I didn't get lost in what I was doing today. That eventually became, yeah, you saw some artwork a minute ago, and we'll talk about that in a second. This eventually became our narrative doc, which we'll take a look at here in a second. Now, as for artwork, you'll notice as we're going through here, we're seeing some artwork. That's because I did this with ChatGPT, and periodically I would ask it to create an image of the things that we were talking about, and that's where we got some of these. And I really think that that helps, especially if you're telling a sci-fi or something that doesn't take place in like normal world that you're used to. It really helps generate a little bit of creativity and give you a look at the world that you're creating. So it's something I like to do. And in fact, I actually have an entire artwork file with a ton and a ton and a ton of different pictures in here. Some of that you'll find on the Patreon and whatnot if you want to look at that some more. This doc here is actually the co-author prompt that I use. I'm not really writing the narrative here inside of ChatGPT. I'm writing it mostly in the playground with an assistant, and I'll explain why here in just a little bit. You can kind of use this process or prompt inside of ChatGPT, but definitely better in the assistant is kind of like the instruction set. This has kind of the whole process that we went through written out. Again, this is something it wrote for me that I just had it put in a text file and I dropped it down. But this is the basic process we follow. I give that to Henry David. This is the assistant I set up as the world's greatest co-author, and it actually believes it is the world's greatest co-author. And it's interesting to work with this particular instruction set like this. You'll notice down here what I've done is I've taken my files and I export them to text files. There are some PDFs in here. You probably shouldn't use PDFs because it has to explode those and pull the text out of it. So if you use text files, definitely do that. I have a really long-winded technical reason why those are PDFs, but generally speaking, you should probably use text files. So what I've done is I've fed all that stuff into it. You can see we're pretty far along here. We're actually what are we working on? Chapter 17, Scene 3. So that's what I'm going to show you how I work that out today. So here we are. We're in the chat. It's done Scene 2. It actually looked really good. I'm not going to make any changes to that. I like that scene just the way it was, so I'm going to say that looks perfect. We'll keep that the way it is in our first draft. I like to keep it informed as to what I'm doing with things. So in some cases it might give me something and I might go in and change a few words, or rearrange a couple of things. If I do something like that, I paste it back in and I then ask it to give me its opinion on the changes I made. Most of the time it's pretty receptive to them, but there have been occasions where it said, "Meh, let's not do it that way. Maybe a better way would be to do it like this," and then it'll give me an example, and I may and or may not take and cut that stuff and paste it into my little notepad file, which then goes into the narrative. So moving on with this, what I'm going to do is say, that looks perfect, we'll keep that the way it is in our first draft, and then I'm going to come back over here. This is my narrative file. Everything that's been written is all up here, and then we get down here to the remaining outlines, and these are things that still need to be written that came from that outline file we looked at a little while ago. So right now we're ready for scene 3 of chapter 17, and even though it already has this, I'm going to copy it. I'm going to come back over and I'm going to say, let's do the next scene. Here it is for reference. Let me know if you have any questions. And I usually do next line. I go 1, 2, 3, and then I paste it in there like that. 1, 2, 3. That way it knows that's the little outline piece. And then underneath that I say, if there aren't any further questions, let's see if we can bring this to life in 1,200 to 1,500 words with the same awesome quality as before. So I'm encouraging it with this, and I'm also letting it know that it can ask me questions, and if it does ask me questions, I'll answer them, and that will help us build the next little piece. Otherwise, I'm going to let it go ahead and continue, and we're going to see what's going to happen off this. Now, it already knows that it should look into these files to get information on characters or information on locations if it doesn't already have it. Now, it should have everything it needs, I think, for this particular scene right here. Now, something else you'll notice, when you're working inside the playground, you're working with the assistants, it runs much slower than if you're over here and you're working with ChatGPT. Now, one of the reasons why I'm working with an assistant like this is because I'm going to script out some of this and take away some of this manual process of me copying and pasting things and moving things from one doc to another doc, because that's all stuff that can be taken care of programmatically on the back end. And since I'm a software developer, I'm going to go ahead and try to script a little bit of that out. That way it can go ahead and live update the files as needed, create them as needed, update the narrative as needed, because you know, I'm old and I'm lazy, and I like the machine to do as much as possible without actually taking over the entire process. Because for me, this is a collaborative process. This is about me being able to tell or write the stories that are trapped in my head. And I know a lot of people are like that. You've got these stories that they're just stuck in there, and you'd love to be able to sit down, write them out, see them, hold them, smell them, touch them, feel them. And that's what this is about for me. This is a methodology for me to sit down and be able to do this quickly and easily without having to struggle with things that I'm just not really good at. It's not my expertise. Now, that doesn't mean I can't be a great storyteller and I don't have awesome stories that I can't share with the world, because I think I do. And looking at Waking Anton, some of the reception it's gotten, it's a pretty good story. And these all tie in together. So it's a greater narrative. And I wouldn't have even been able to do that if I hadn't actually sat down and chatted with ChatGPT about different ways of doing things. Look at this. Okay, so here we've got our next piece of narrative. I'm going to copy this all the way up to here. Let's see, what did he say right after this? Offers, all right, so no real comments on it or anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to a notepad and I'm going to paste that in here. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to give it a read, and I'm going to make sure that it's what I'm looking for. You know, this is my chance and my opportunity to say, oh no, maybe she needs to be a little madder, or maybe she needs to be happier, or maybe we need to inject a little humor, or maybe this isn't really showing the character the way it should be. Now, I've been really lucky here in this particular run. It's really spot on with all of the characters, and it's really following our plot well. Yeah, this is actually probably good enough for me to toss into our first draft doc. Now, I'm not going to read it quite as thoroughly as I normally would, because I'm trying to show you how all this works, or how I do all this. So I've still got it sitting over here. I'm going to come over, I'm going to copy the title for that scene, and I'm going to come in and paste it, and then I'm going to come underneath that. I'm going to come back over, copy, probably exit that. Now, again, if I had changes, I would go ahead and make those changes, and I would go to the assistant and I would say, hey, these are my changes, and I'd go through that entire process. Okay? Now, another thing I do as I go along with all of this is I take these pieces and I'll go back over here, and this is just ChatGPT, and you can see how I start my conversations with it. I try to be kind of buddy-buddy, and I try to use a lot of slang, and that's because when you're more creative with your language, the more creativity you can draw out of these language models. So I try to be a little goofy and a little bit silly with it, and I try to bring that out. Basically, all I'm doing here is I'm saying, hey, I've got some stuff I need some help reviewing with. Do you mind doing it? I ask if it minds to do this stuff. I don't tell it to do stuff, I ask, because it's a language model based on the way people write. You get that? So it responds very similar to the way a person would. So when you ask it to do things, it's a lot more receptive, and you can avoid that whole lazy GPT thing. Okay, so I ask it to do that, and what I'm doing is I'm asking it to give me reader types. I have it read that, and I have it break it down. See, this is the piece right here. These are the different reader types that it thinks would like this type of story, okay? And then I have it add this sixth one called the harsh critic. And they're a combo of everybody, plus they're focused on overall quality, making them almost an editor. And then they look for plot problems, character problems, grammar, spelling issues. And that's something you'll find with the language models. You will occasionally get commonly misspelled words. It's not as common as it was back in November of 2023, but it's something I have run into at least once or twice while doing Saving Gabe, and this is February 2024. So you do definitely have to spell check some of this stuff and look for some grammar things. So I have it create these characters, kind of. And then I have it take on their personality, and I have it rate it 1 to 100 in 3 different metrics. And I actually have it choose the metrics itself. And you can see the metrics it chose were engagement, believability, and craftsmanship. So this is how it ranks the last piece I gave it. 90, 85, 88 on the ethical explorer, 92, 80, 85 on speculative fiction aficionado. Probably want to try to bump that up a little bit. Character-driven reader, strategic thinker, lore lover, and of course our harsh critic. Oh, harsh critic's not believing it too much either. Gave us like a C there. So we know we have a little bit that we need to work on when we go into our second draft with this. And what we're going to do there is we're going to take each piece of it, we're going to run it through something like this, and we're going to look for ways that we can improve the narrative. And we'll ask it to actually do those things for us, and then we'll run it through another little rating thing and see if we can actually get it boosted up some. And then just to make sure, we'll take it and we'll run that same thing through like Bard and ask, well, I guess it's Gemini now. We'll ask it to do something very similar, and we'll get another baseline rating and kind of review of what that looks like. Something that's this is our piece, this is our story, so we're inclined to really like it and love it. But if we can get some kind of impartial feedback back to us to let us know where we need to work on it to make it better, then that's definitely something awesome you can do. So let's take this next piece, and before I do that, I'm going to say, awesome. Thanks. You got to really spell that right, though. Awesome. Thanks. Here's the next one. Can we do it again? See, I'm asking. 1, 2, 3. That way it kind of knows there's a separation. I'm going to paste the one we just did a minute ago in. I haven't really edited or really read it that far, but let's go ahead and see what this rates it out as. Alright, so you can see the speed difference here. You know, in this interface you're getting something back really, really fast. Of course, this is your standard ChatGPT 4 model, and over here in the playground, I'm actually working with a preview model, and it is a little bit different. Okay, let's see, how's it right now? We're getting in the 80s. We've got a low 90s, 80s. Yeah, see, I'd like this story to hit into the 90s, 95s, or higher. We'll see what our harsh critic says about it, and yeah, here comes our harsh critic. What's he going to say? Doesn't find it super engaging. I mean, it's engaging. It's a B minus, you know, C, C plus. Okay, so definitely these pieces do need a little bit of love and a little bit of work, and we can do that when we do our second draft on it. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and say that that's fine for right at the moment, since I'm trying to do a video and show you guys how I do some of this stuff. But I'll probably come back and tweak that just a little bit and see if I can't get it up a little bit more before I actually call it good for the first draft. Anyway, I think that's about all I've got to show you on this right now. The next time when we look at this stuff, we'll look a little bit deeper into that whole rating review and how I do my second draft. So once I get this first draft knocked out, we'll come back and then we'll look at how we take that and we improve it and polish it. And there's a couple of different rounds I run through on that. 2 different rounds of machine editing, and then I do a final human read on it. And then we can talk about human editing and things like that once we get to that point on Saving Gabe. But yeah, I'm hoping I can get this first draft knocked out today. And then maybe in the next couple of weeks I can do some of the machine learning stuff on it, and then we can do our polish. So probably 30 days and I can have this kicked out, and total time spent on it is probably going to be about 8 to 12 hours, I think. Do it a little bit slower than Waking Anton, but that's because I'm trying to document as much as I can in the process as we go. So hope this helps somebody out there and you picked up a few tips that will help you in your storytelling world.